Cath.
Hi.
Hi. Very good to have you onto the podcast. Um, I've actually read some of your book, The Long Win. Not all of it, some of it. And what I read, I really did enjoy about the concept of winning. And also, as someone who comes from a sports background and also arts background as well, which will probably connect to this as well, I was very interested in your views. And obviously, I've watched your latest TED Talk as well. So I'm really glad to have you on the podcast. Before we get into it, like I say to all my guests, some people, especially in the UK, will know who you are for your sporting achievements, but others may not. So just a quick summary of who you are and basically your journey up until this point.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for inviting me for the conversation. So I've probably got different strands to my life. The most obvious sporting one is having been an Olympic rower for 10 years. So in the British rowing team, competed in three Olympics at 1996 Atlanta, 2000 Sydney, and 2004 in Athens, winning a silver medal in Athens in a crew with Catherine Granger, having become world champions the year before. And so that was sort of one part of my life. The other part is having been a diplomat working for the British Foreign Office for 12 years and operating in obviously very often quite conflict affected environments and involved in sort of political negotiations as part of that. And then, sort of, the bit that in a way brings those together is what I've been doing for the last 10 years or so, which is working in leadership development, in culture change, working with organizations and in sport to think about actually how do we create an environment where people can do their best work together, we can actually create effective teams, but people can thrive at the same time, and really sort of challenging some of maybe our assumptions about how we used to do that. The book sort of takes us into some of those questions.
Very cool. Just going on your last point there about what you're currently doing, and it'll be linked to the book and somewhat. How difficult is that challenge to achieve? Because obviously you want people to thrive within a team. But then I imagine most teams, especially if in organised competition, not just playing friendlies, they're going to have a goal at the end of it, and some of them are going to want to be more competitive than others. So, how do you achieve that balance between wanting to win but wanting everyone to thrive at the same time?
So I think I don't see those two things as sort of separate as a choice or an either or even having to balance. I think they are kind of essential to each other in many ways. Certainly, the thriving is essential to sustaining performance. So I think you might have short-term success whilst not flourishing, but to sustain that. And actually, if you also need to be an environment where you've got to constantly raise what you're doing, the standards, try new things, you need to be in a safe environment to explore, fail, improve. So I think it's about, therefore, it comes to the heart of the book, challenging actually what assumptions we have about what success looks like, about how we define it. And you talked about having goals. So it's about being really careful about how we define those goals so that they don't, in effect, constrain us, but they actually create the conditions for us to, yeah, maybe win some races along the way, but actually as part of something bigger. That's really, the kind of what the long win is about.
So, in both your TED talk and your book, you talk about the etymology of both the words winning and competition. Can you just go into a bit of detail of those two?
Yeah, so what I wanted to do was to sort of unpick, the first part of the book kind of unpicks our assumptions of what winning means, how we've come to have this quite narrow view of winning as being against someone else, being better than someone else, often in just, measured or defined in quite a short-term way. It's winning the next race, it's being the best at something. And that's actually not those sorts of goals often don't help us to thrive and don't help us to be successful in the long term. They often make us quite afraid to try new things, afraid to manage to be to manage failure, quite hard to be resilient. And actually, the kind of origins of these words comes from quite different roots, and that's maybe a helpful part of starting to think differently about them and then coming towards more of a long win mindset. So winning comes from an Old English word, gewin, which was, it's actually a mixture of two words, gewin and wunia. And gewin was about effort,
Mhm.
labour, hard work, and wunia is about beauty. And, beauty and joy And so I think if those two things are at the heart of winning, that's actually where it started off, in a space where people weren't ranking themselves in the Middle Ages as to who's the greatest of all times. They were actually working bloody hard to survive, working really hard, but also appreciating beauty around them, whether that would be in the natural world, most likely, or in their families. And so those are the concepts at the heart of the word. And you can see then how we've started to corrupt it over time. The other word you talked about is competition, competing, and that comes from the Latin word competere, and that literally means to strive together. And that's really important because what we've done is we've lost the together and turned it into against. And when we're striving together to explore what we're capable, we use each other and we both gain. We both get to different heights. And a classic example would be sort of Federer and Nadal, who needed each other in order to take their tennis to the next level. They weren't fighting against each other, they were really competing in with each other. And through that, they then transcend what either of them had been capable of before. They transcend the whole sport, take it to the next level. But what we've tended to do in our language, because winning also has become very associated with the battlefield is really where a lot of our metaphors come from to do with winning, then it becomes this combative piece. It's against somebody else. You've got to destroy your opponent. You've got to, yeah, they're the enemy. And that sort of combative language that maybe worked in a traditional military sense is often really unhelpful in sport or in wider life at all. Whereas actually, if we are wasting a lot of energy hating our opponent, yeah, we often see that it's kind of the way we thought about sport in the 80s. It's really not very sophisticated psychology to be using that now. It detracts, it kind of distracts, and means your energies go towards something that isn't helping your performance. It often means you then aren't focusing on the things you want to be focusing on in order to execute whatever it is you're doing, whether it's boxing or rowing or gymnastics, to the best of your ability. You're then focusing on someone else, and you're also flooding your body with a load of very negative, fear-driven stress hormones, which creates tension, stops you being able to focus or think rationally. And so, yeah, we've kind of got quite trapped. And what would be more helpful is to go back to those original definitions.
You say one of the things about what you describe is about focus and how can you reduce focus, but is that always the case? And specifically, I was thinking about CEOs of big conglomerates in that they work almost to old age, and yet their focus is still the same. I want to be on top. I want to basically crush like the companies below me, so to speak. Isn't that part of actually competition and wanting to win? Is that a good thing, or actually can you get too too much?
So I think you have to think about what's the impact of that mindset. So I think sometimes maybe it's also a bit for show. But increasingly, you see if you need to motivate people, if you need to help people be resilient, if you need people to collaborate, if you need people to innovate, then that language kind of kills off those things from happening. You see everyone, you see everything as a battle, you see everyone as an enemy. And often, in order to stay number one in your industry, then probably what you need to focus on is being the best, developing your innovation, making sure that people feel really connected to, the purpose, the core reason your company exists, the people that you might be helping, or, the kind of end consequences of whatever it is your company does. Those are things that help people to do good work. So ultimately, what that CEO says is kind of tested in whether it helps that company to perform. And what you find is that kind of mentality usually leaves people cold. It means they don't enjoy their jobs. It means they don't feel connected to the work they do. It means they can't be bothered if they find a different way of doing it. They don't. They just do what they've always done. And if there's, again, that sort of opportunity for, innovating, they don't bother collaborating. They don't bother because all I've got to do is, I don't know, crush them or something. It's not a positive motivation. It's not going to help you kind of bring what's, that extra effort, discretionary effort, doesn't come from that kind of motivation. And so I think there are less of those leaders around because you don't get the performance. And it's the talk isn't good enough. You want to see what's the impact of that kind of thinking on your organization.
You mentioned earlier about Federer and Nadal, how they needed each other, which I agree with. And I think some of the Man United players from the late 90s have said when Arsene Wenger and Arsenal came up, how they needed that team because it pushed them onto another level, so on and so forth. Which I understand, but ultimately, isn't that our end goal still to win? Because as much as you might think respect your opponent and might push you to achieve more, surely there comes a point where you just want to win because you don't want to lose because otherwise psychologically that can be devastating. So do you expect actually those that push you along, but ultimately you still want to achieve that goal?
So I think winning is the byproduct, but it's not necessarily what you're focusing your energies on. You are increasing the likelihood of winning. That's why we're not saying, oh, losing is a good thing. Losing is good, because that's not getting the most out of yourself. So what I want through the long win to create is a definition of success that actually helps us to explore what we're capable of. Now, that might be winning something, or it might not. The point is, are we defining it in a way that means we discover our true potential? If we are defining it in a narrow way that is purely about beating someone else, that is purely about destruction, that is focused on that and nothing else, I think we don't actually get to be the best we can be. And therefore, in an example like Federer and Nadal, the competitions are creating an environment for them to explore what they're capable of. Now, what's the byproduct? They win because they end up being the best. But they're going into that constantly trying to redefine, get to the next level, test out some things, and using each other to do that. So I think really what they're trying to do is take their sport to the next level, transcend their sport, connect with everyone playing it. Their love of the game is such that they want to see what's possible. Could I get a ball back from that angle? What's possible? The intensity, all of the different technical elements. And the byproduct is they end up winning quite a few things along the way because they do it at such a high level. But I don't think they're that fussed about counting the trophies and whether it's 17 or 18 or things that we obsess about. And you only have to look at the recent letter that Federer wrote on Nadal's retirement. They didn't talk about counting trophies. They talk about incredible matches they had together. They talk about the generosity to each other, the love of the game, how one pushed the other to look inside themselves and explore more, find more, push their capability more. So I don't see anything that says it was just about winning, but I think it's a byproduct of it.
So taking that, and I'll use the term small wins because it's something I've heard before. Is would winning the way we define winning now? Does it necessarily have to be against someone, or could it be against yourself? And what I mean by that, say, as an example, I don't know, someone's been in a car accident and they're struggling to walk again, and then they're relearning that, and every time they achieve like a little goal so they can walk again, they how can I put this? It's an achievement for them. If you understand what I mean, everything's a small win. It's step by step by step. Is there such a thing as small wins, or is it just a sense of
Sure.
achievement that you've achieved it also?
Sure. So I think what I don't want the use, I don't like that use of against at all. You're not against yourself. In that scenario, you're working with yourself, very
Yeah.
much with, and with others and a community. It is about connecting. So in that pursuit of exploring what we're capable, we're doing it with other people. We can't do it alone. Even if you're in a single sport, you're doing it with a team. You're doing it with your competitors. You are doing it, with others. So in that example, you're doing it with yourself and all the people who would be helping you in that scenario. What I'm doing through the long win is actually stretching success and our time concept of success, our definition of it, that encompasses both today and the long term. So quite often we jump into this middle term sort of temporary outcome, winning the next race, quarterly results, exam grades, these sort of things that are 3 months away, year away, couple of years away, that sort of thing. And actually, what I think it's then important that today is successful on a day that you don't win any medals or pass your exams or get your quarterly results. How do you make today successful? Because if your measure is something that happens in 2 years, well, you don't even know if that's going to happen. That's not great. And that emphasis then gets us to think about how we're showing up matters today. Yeah, I'm going to give my best energy. I'm going to, you know, support others. I'm going to allow others to challenge me. I'm going to listen to the feedback that they bring. I'm going to really stay true to my values when they're tested. That is part of my success today. And that then, if I'm focusing, if that's part of it, then over the longer term, those values become really powerful and grounded. I'm also, though, thinking beyond that short term goal to the longer term purpose. So, why do I want to win a medal? Yeah, we see so many athletes who've won the ultimate accolade and they say they're depressed, they're empty. There are so many examples, from Johnny Wilkinson, Victoria Pendleton, Tyson Fury, Andre Agassi, just a list of athletes. You think, how's that possible? Because you've just won something that is supposedly life-changing and going to make your life better forever. How can you feel, what's gone wrong there? It's not a great picture of winning if you feel depressed, empty, feeling like you wish you hadn't bothered. Well, that means you've defined it wrong, surely, because winning should have more than a temporary effect, like it's fine for 2 minutes on the podium and then it's meaningless. That's crazy, isn't it? And what's happened though is that medal has become disconnected from a longer term purpose. So a sense of it's of value to a community, it's of value to other people in your life, it's of value because of the person you've become in the pursuit of it. Yeah, in itself, that medal is a round piece of metal. It's an inanimate object on a ribbon. Its value is in what it represents that has human meaning, that has a human value to it. Who are the people to whom this also has meaning? What's that community who've learned something through your journey towards it, who've been on the journey with you? What are the things you've learned when you step off the podium that help make you a better person, that help you in the next part of your life, whether that's another race or you move on? And so again, that's what the long win is doing, is trying to make sure that we don't have these scenarios where people win but feel, oh, well, what have I got to do next? Just win again. And then it becomes empty and I'm chasing something and I don't know why I'm chasing it and I feel deeply unfulfilled. So that phenomenon, which is so strong in society where we're chasing things and then the instant we get it, we are unfulfilled, is really damaging because we don't feel we're moving on. We're not motivated to do it again. We've lost connection with others. Yeah, winning must be something that means we have greater connection, not less connection. Otherwise, it's really hard to feel any joy.
Well, you kind of answered my next question, which was going to be, can someone with a over exuberant winning mentality actually enjoy it? Because from what you're saying there, it's almost like these short bursts of adrenaline where, yes, they'll win this, yes, I'll win that, yes, I'll win that. Okay, what can I do next? I'll just do it over again and again. And especially in sport where your age is going to catch up with you and you're going to have a certain shelf life, does that ultra focus not only become not just boring a little bit, but also stop you focusing on the future and what you can plan next?
Yeah, so it's the definition of success that is playing to a different part of our brain. So we basically have two systems, and we have a short-term extrinsic system where the external measures of success kind of connect in. So that's, the medals, the trophies, the certificates, the bonus, the salary, external material things. And we want them, and we're sort of conditioned to often lots of the worlds we move in to kind of measure them. They're very measurable, a medal table, your quarterly results, your sales targets, but they leave us cold. Yeah, they work at a very superficial level, and as soon as we have them, we want another one. It works to the part of our brains like an addiction, like social media. We get a like, we want another one. Yeah, we get a hit, I'm going to go again. And so that leaves us in a spiral of deep unfulfillment. If you think of an addictive mindset, it's playing to that mindset. The other part of our brains that we have is the part of us that wants to feel part of progress, that wants to be part of something meaningful, that has a purpose, that makes the world around us better, that has an impact on people beyond ourselves. And that then is about intrinsic motivation that works at a much deeper level. It actually helps us to be more creative and resilient, which is often really important to sustaining high performance. And the intrinsic elements of motivation include purpose, include autonomy, having a say, defining the things that are important and your voice being heard in that. It's about mastery, constant learning. As humans, we have this incredible capability to actually learn new things every day. That is also quite fulfilling. We start off in early life wanting to find out everything about why aeroplanes stay in the sky, and we're hugely hungry and curious. It is innate in us. Now, often it's been killed off by these other sort of silly, narrow winning systems and other things we experience, but fundamentally, learning and growing, finding out stuff about ourselves is deeply motivating to us. And the last thing is a sense of belonging. I belong to a community. I belong to something. I'm pursuing my excellence in rowing as part of a bigger story that other people are part of that will last beyond me. And so when we have those elements involved in our definition of success, then we have something that has meaningful beyond the moment we cross the line, whether we come first or last. What that means is that actually when we win, we don't have that sense of it's meaningless. It instantly has meaning. And when we lose, it means we don't go into this massive crash. My life has no meaning. This is so awful. I've failed. You sort of go, oh, yeah, I've learned some stuff. I put myself out there. Yeah. And I've just learned a bunch of things that I'm going to take into the next time I go because I'm always learning. And you see that in how people like Josh Kerr reframes that 1500 meters race in Paris immediately. Of course, he was going out to win. Nothing wrong with that. But immediately on coming second, he doesn't go into some months long crash that we've seen athletes do. He's immediately said it's a step on from the previous Olympics. Once, he gives full respect. If you don't respect your competitor who won, then what are you saying about the event and what you're involved in? You must respect that person. And then he's just, what can I learn from that to take me and make me even better next time? And so we see these thought patterns really helping athletes not have a massive crash when they lose, and let's face it, it's inevitable that we'll lose, and enable us to make sense and move on and keep improving. And basically, that's your life as an athlete, is trying to constantly improve in what you do and not getting thrown off from that. So it gives them a much more resilient mindset, and it helps over the longer term to be much more resilient.
What sacrifices, and I'm not just talking psychologically, but what sacrifices do people who have this ultra winning mentality have to make in order to stay at that level?
Well, I think I mean, sacrifice is a sort of not a word I necessarily use. I think the thing is, if you are thriving in the pursuit of excellence and your definition of success is one that has intrinsic meaning, then you're not suffering. If you are just chasing the trophy and somehow thinking that that trophy is going to make you worth more as an individual, is going to make everything okay, is going to lead to some never-ending happiness, then you're really setting yourself up to suffer, whether you win it or not. That's why this definition of success is so important, because it changes the experience and it also gives us a better chance of reaching our potential.
Yeah. I mean, what I mean by sacrifices, I'm talking more about if you're on this gravy train, does it affect other areas in your life? So, say, I don't know, if you want to start a family, but you're at your peak of your powers, so to speak, there might be other things outside of that that it might affect. Not in the short term, because short term is great. You got adulation and so on and so forth. But I'm just wondering, in the long term, does it have an effect on your long term, both yourself and yourself around others?
Well, I think if you have a more meaningful sense of what success looks like, then you're either building that into your picture or you're not. You're saying, I'm making a choice that this matters most. And so I'm going to stay purely dedicated to my Olympic career. Or actually, now it's time for me to combine the Olympics with having a family. I don't think there's a kind of one way there. And then it's about sort of framing it, isn't it? And if I'm going to have to make sort of compromises, then my family's set up for that. Are they up for that? Or do I want to take a break? I just think you have lots of choices to make in those scenarios. So I don't think it's one. It's a kind of either or.
One of the things, well, first of all, I'll ask this in regards to winning. We've talked a lot about sport. One of the reasons being because of the nature of sport is obviously competition, it's winning, achieving all those awards. But what would winning be defined like if you're in a profession which isn't like that? So specifically, I'm talking about the arts. What would winning be in that sense? Would it just be the chance to do what you love and just go on stage or paint your painting? Like, what would winning be in that field?
Yeah, well, I would go back to those sort of those core intrinsic measures that what's the purpose? Who does and who does it connect you with? That belonging, that sense of kind of group identity. What are you learn? How are you developing yourself, expressing yourself, learning that mastery piece? The wonderful thing about the arts is there's no completion. I haven't finished being an artist. I haven't ever perfected and got to the end of developing my artistic skills. As in sport, we've never really finished exploring what we're capable of. And so, what I think is a shame is that often we put these structures onto the arts. We have competitions in art. We kind of try and bring in this sense of who's the best. We have awards for artists because in our society, I suppose we feel that's the only way we can celebrate people. And I think that that is a shame because I think that stops us. Yeah, it forces us to compare and rank something that can't be really compared and ranked. We will all have a sort of subjective views, but I think what happens when you have competitions in something like the arts is that you kill a certain amount of creativity because people start thinking, what do I need to do in order to win the prize? And when you do that, you're probably not staying completely true to your art of what's that pure expression, self-expression, or expression of something around you that you want to express through art that may or may not, the judges may or may not like it, but I'm going to pursue it because it's the artistic drive or vision that I have. And what people then start to do is think, oh, well, I think the judges like this and they like this last year. So you find that you get more conformity. That's not healthy in a space that need have none of that. And you see that again, in our education system. Yeah, we all kind of try and come out with the same answers to get the top marks. So what have we created in terms of patterns of thinking across our young people? We all come out of school thinking the same way. In Matthew Syed's writing his books, like his book around rebel ideas, he said, we're all individually smart but collectively stupid because we all say this, we all know the same amount of information about the same things and have been taught the same answers. And that's not very healthy for a society where we've got all kinds of complex issues where there is no right solution. There are many possible solutions, and we need to draw lots of different ways of thinking in order to help us work out what future security looks like, or future healthcare globally, or climate protection, or international trade. None of these things have a right answer, and we need to work together. So I think, that's what we also, one of the sort of damage that comes from this putting everything into a competition is we lose diversity of thinking, we lose creativity, we stifle possibilities, and we often, also stifle collaboration.
I am a big movie fan, and obviously a few days ago we heard about David Lynch, and I read a tribute that someone made of him, and they said that he was one of the last free thinkers in terms of directors, whereas now you got directors who are good, but they're very corporatized. And the reason I say that is because, and you alluded to it with education, is that yes, there's a goal in terms, might be a goal in terms of getting grades and whatnot, or even like a films where you want to get an Oscar or the
Yeah.
BAFTA. But is there a danger that instead of being creative or free thinking in those fields, because you have an end goal in them, that you think more about the expediency as opposed to the actual what you're actually learning? So, for example, if you're going university, your thought process is, right, I just got to get this degree to get a job. Whereas you might think, actually, I want to take my time a little bit and learn from it. And it's not to say you're not learning from it, but your end goal seems to be more, I
Yeah.
need a degree to get the job, if you know what I mean.
Exactly. So the long win is about not just having a simplistic outcome goal, but actually thinking for the long term, how I study for my degree matters. Yeah, I could just probably only hone in on what's like to come in the exam and just cram it in and only spend my time on that. Or I could invest time in listening to other views that differ from mine, having debates, deepening my understanding of the subject, maybe in areas beyond what will come up on the exam paper, because A, I'm interested in it, and B, it's maybe a subject that matters beyond the schoolroom, beyond the university room, and maybe something that I might want to be involved in a future job. I might not get marks for it in an exam, but it still has value. And that's one of the things that I want to challenge, this sense that, if you leave school and you've got a bunch of grades, that is the entirety of the value of your school life. That can't be true. There are many things that will not come up in the exam that matter and that will determine the what happens next in your life. Your ability to understand others, manage conflict, manage stress, um, show kindness, show understanding for others. Those things are also important, but because they don't show up on an exam paper, we lose sight of them. But in the work I do around leadership development, often we find that people have become very, very good at their jobs technically. They're an excellent lawyer or engineer, but then they get to a point where they are in a leadership position and they are in control and they have responsibility for things beyond their simple technical knowledge. So they need to think across topics. They need to also, there's a solution where they've got to lead into an area that perhaps the company hasn't been before. So there's no solution here. And you can't rely on the fact that you have got brilliant technical knowledge of engineering or something. You've got to facilitate, bring together other people in order together to co-create a possible way forward. Those skills do not exist in our exams, and yet they are often essential in organizational life, maybe in family life to an extent as well. And so I see that kind of gap between sometimes the things we need to be really successful later, to be leading in whatever field we're in, whether it's the arts, sport, business, public life. And sometimes the things that we valued, there's a gap between what we need and what we actually valued when people were young and growing up. So in educational terms, I really sort of want us to get away from this obsession with assessment of very narrow qualities that do not show the whole picture of learning and growth of a young person.
Yeah, as you say, because again, I've spoken to people about education in this country, and it seems to be that, like I say, learn the subjects and that's it. Whereas, like you say, in outside world, you need a rounded approach to certain things as well. And that kind of leads on to my next question, which is how has leadership, or not even leadership, but our concept of winning changed through the decades? Has it got any better? Has it got any worse? Has it not changed at all? Like, how have we thought of winning through like decades?
So I think it's got to a really narrow point, and that's what was kind of, really causing me to write the book. But I think there are some green shoots, as it were. I think it has got ever narrower as we have tried to apply these sort of militaristic concepts and concepts that potentially worked also a century ago when we were involved largely in manufacturing, where it was okay to keep doing the same things over again. If you're working in a factory, maybe you don't need huge creativity, maybe you don't need huge innovation. People are just working 9 to 5, they don't need huge resilience. Then okay, maybe that was okay to have this sort of very narrow target driven world. But what we find now is it's become so narrow in our education system, in often the way we measure success at work, that it's holding us back. And we live in an age where actually we need to keep progressing and opening up and thinking differently and be able to manage the challenges that we face and also the opportunities to work with AI, to think about what's this going to look like. And if we don't have the ability, the adaptability in order to do that, then we're just going to kind of sit and potentially let it go, not in the best direction. So I think it has got to a narrow point. I think there are some forces that have helped us to show ways in which we could open it up. And I think in sport there are certain people like Federer and Nadal who show that there's another way. I think more athletes, in order to sustain their careers, are realizing they need to think differently. In order to bring meaning to what they're doing, they need to have a sense of something bigger than that. Adam Peaty is an example of someone who's completely redefined what success in sport looks like. And I think in the business world, where there are genuine purpose-driven organizations who are reshaping what it means to be successful at work. The big examples like Patagonia, organizations where they are seeing success not purely measured in a profit outcome. We see some ways in which things could be different. So I think there are people innovating, and they need to, because actually often we're just not progressing fast enough. We're not the organizations sort of die out because they haven't got strong enough motivation across the workforce. They haven't got high enough productivity, and they haven't got that innovation to keep renewing themselves. So in those fast moving industries, we see people forced to think differently. But in a lot of corporate life, we're stuck in this still quite narrow way. We're stuck, with very low productivity. We're sort of stuck in lots of places. And I think there is a need to rethink so that we're not losing out on opportunities to really explore, what's possible in the face of these massive challenges.
How easy is it for anyone, from what you're saying, to do what you've prescribed? And I agree with you. How is it to do that when there's financial pressures? So, for example, if you're a professional athlete and you've been given money via the lottery and you have to achieve certain aims to do that, or if you're a film director and the studio gives you so much money to make a film and they want you to basically recoup it back, how easy is it to do what you've said when those financial pressures? Because ultimately, if you fail at those, then that could mean your job. So, again, how do you get that balance right?
Yeah, so I mean, that question assumes that by doing this, somehow you're doing it less well, whereas in actual fact, you're doing it better. So the narrow way of thinking, classically in sport, it holds our performance back. It means we can't think under pressure. It means we aren't very resilient when things go wrong. It means we aren't able to continue progressing and feeling motivated to keep going. So that's not good for performance. And I think that's why we are seeing change in sport, that we can't afford to not take a long win approach because it hurts performance. So it's actually a win-win. It's almost like, how stupid are we to keep going in this old system because it is holding us back. That's my attack on definitions of success that we call success. But actually, if you look at them, they're constraining us. They're causing us suffering. They're causing us not to be able to perform at our best, particularly in anything other than the very immediate short term. And I really believe that's why sport is forced to change, because flooding your body with fear and stress hormones does not make for good performance. So why would you do that? Why would you be performing because you've got to win the next race and you're afraid of failure? Yeah, those things just don't work anymore. You could win 20, 30, 40 years ago, but the standard is so high and you're losing an element of performance by doing that that you can't afford to give that away anymore. I think, even in other worlds, in anything other than the short term, if you give in to that formula, I've got to do this film like this because it's what people want, well, they'll only want it for quite a short period of time, and probably other people are doing it too. And actually, what you could be doing if you invested in that greater quality and the uniqueness of what you bring is potentially kind of create something that's better for the longer term. So we do have this sort of slight short-term, long-term pull. And again, we're often, a lot of pressures in our work environment, potentially financial too, that I've just got to get this next thing done in order to get through a financial threshold. But ultimately, it's worth stepping back and going, but then maybe I've got nothing in a couple of years because I haven't moved and innovated with the times, and I haven't really invested in what I'm capable of doing. And now other people have kind of taken the field on. So it's asking those questions. Am I sort of giving into some formula that's comfortable, but is it really exploring what I'm capable of?
Yeah, indeed. As a diplomat, obviously you had a lot of negotiation that was involved when you were speaking to various people, but ultimately there was a goal at the end of it. Judging by what you said, how do you, again, in from a political realm, how do you get that balance? Because obviously you don't want to go in there hard and say, I'm going to win, I'm going to get my deal, because you'll just put the other person off and the other person will actually be more intransient in their position. So in that position and in politics in general, how do you get that balance between doing what's best for not just yourself but for the country you represent, but actually making sure that you both get what you want at the end of the day?
So I think the really interesting learning from that world, which I found really fascinating, is yeah, as you say, that realization that going all guns for what I want and trying to prove you're wrong and I'm right and marshalling lots of evidence that says I'm right and you're wrong actually only increases the hostility between us and pushes you further away from me. So that doesn't help me really move things forward in a sustainable way. If an outcome of a negotiation is that one party wins at the other cost, a sort of zero, what we call zero sum game outcome, then it's usually not an outcome that's sustainable. And you'll be back round the negotiating table just as soon as the unhappy party have managed to assert some power or have taken up violent means. So actually what you need to do is to create more of a sort of win-win thinking approach, is to really work on that mindset, to really think about what's possible together. And the first step is always listening. And in negotiation theory, also in kind of experiments about bringing together groups who think differently, the first, and in debating as well, the first sort of principle is I need to understand your view and be able to articulate it, not agree with it. Yeah, we've got opposing views on something, but I need to be able to really understand why you think the way you think and be able to explain that in a way that you say, yes, that explains it. And vice versa, you need to be able to understand why I think the way I think and the reasons for that and be able to articulate it. And okay, you're not agreeing with me, I'm not agreeing with you. But in the process of understanding the way you think and why, my position subtly starts to shift. The same for you. You naturally just see the world from a slightly different perspective. And from that, over time emerges some other solutions. Probably aren't exactly where we started in your position or in my position, but the process of negotiation is about this listening and understanding. And when we deepen our understanding, when I deepen the understanding of my own position and help you to articulate it, I actually start to reflect on my position and thinking, oh yeah, well, I'm not sure about that. That totally stacks up, and might not admit that initially, but I'm starting to think more critically and from a almost a third person angle about my view. You start to do the same, and that then starts to shift people's thinking. Now you can see how that is absent in our social discourse, where whatever the issue is, I shout my view, you shout your view, and we get further away, and we're in opposing camps, and we only move further away, and that's something we must avoid happening when we are negotiating within our teams at work or whatever the everyday scenarios are within our family. We need to get these really powerful listening skills functioning and helping us to think differently and expand our own perspectives.
Is there a degree of patience needed, therefore? Because we talked about short termism, but actually, with something like negotiation, yes, there has to be an
Yeah.
endpoint. There also has to be a deadline, but you have a bit of patience, and it's. I know it's a cliche, and I don't. You don't want to use it, but almost like this chess, so to speak, where you negotiate between yourselves. If it actually, okay, we can concede this, we can see that, we'll gain this, we'll gain that. Is there a bit of patience that's required from everyone, not just
Oh,
diplomacy, but just stick.
massively. I
Yeah.
mean, these diplomatic negotiations go on for hours and days and months, and they're very complex. So you absolutely need patience. You need an ability to keep challenging your own thinking, to staying open-minded, to avoiding sort of judgments, and a way in an optimism that even when it looks like there isn't a path forward, that there's always a possibility of a path forward. You just got to find the way to it. And so, yes, I think so. I think patience is is crucial. And if you don't have it, well, you're just ending up back in combat, aren't you, or back in conflict. And so, yeah, and I think that's probably a skill that our modern digital lives, being really busy and always on, it's perhaps a skill that we're losing touch with a bit.
Yeah. How, I don't know if you covered it in the book, but in terms of winning, how do you think the media does it when it comes to reporting winners? Does it do a good job? Does it do a very bad job? Or how do you think they,
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the problem, I think, this sense with, the winners today, and then we love pulling them down, the losers tomorrow. This binary language is deeply problematic, how it's portrayed. When you win, there's so much hype about the winner. And when you lose, there's so much sort of catastrophe around it. I was even reading about sort of some football commentary or some just a simple football account at the weekend about one of the Premier League teams saying, they were shambolic. And I thought, were they really? Don't we have like thousands and thousands of children in academies who spend all their lives and never get anywhere near that level of playing? And I don't think they were shambolic. I think it's really, really difficult to be playing at that high level week in, week out. Your opposition are excellent and they're trying to test you in every way possible. And that's what's going on. And actually, there's only one goal difference. I think it's deeply misleading and it means we don't appreciate the skill of what's going on. Of course, there's jeopardy in sport. We don't know who's going to win all the time, and it's tiny margins. That's what makes it exciting. So, why this assumption that everybody should be winning all the time? Well, that doesn't work, does it? So I think they are really complicit in that. And I think, again, this sort of, building up people when they win, and in races, this focus, the winner is everything and the others failed. Well, usually the others have played a really critical role in how that winner won the race. Maybe they tested them, maybe they stretched them, and that they brought something out. I mean, the fact is also sometimes in really close races, if you raced it 10 times, you might get 10 different results. But the sense that this person that won by 0.01, they're the hero and everybody else has failed, it makes a nonsense. You can't race an Olympic final without having 8 unbelievably good people in it. And that's what makes it so gripping. So why can't we appreciate more than just the person whose nose crosses the line first? I find it really distorting and really sad.
yeah, indeed. Finally, it's been fascinating to talk to you. How would you like our concept of winning to develop in society? I know that's a bit of a loaded question, long, but just in summary, how would you like it to develop? And do you think that's realistic in this day and age?
I'm optimistic. I think that we need good leaders to see their responsibility to define success in sport, in business, in education, in public life as beyond the short term, to have a vision of what's possible, to think about these sort of trio of pillars that we need to perform well. We must do it whilst people are flourishing, otherwise, it's not sustainable. And it must have a positive, wider social impact. So we should be thinking about, how are we making the world a slightly better place through our business, through this political policy, through what we're learning at school. And I think when you get those things all supercharge each other. And what we actually do is achieve more. Yeah, the long win is about actually getting closer to what we're capable of together rather than at the moment pursuing these narrow definitions of success that are actually holding us back.
Just quickly, because there's a saying, I think I might have mentioned in a previous episode on a podcast from Thomas Sowell, where he talks about there's no solutions, only trade offs. And I just wonder, in regards to winning, is that the case? We have to learn that actually not everything's perfect, that we're going to might have to trade some things off and that we might have to work together, might be more collaborative. Is that more like you want to,
Yeah,
how you,
I think certainly. Look, how do you win at life? I just don't think, as soon as you won one race, well, then there's another race. And whoever wins this trophy, there's another trophy after it. So there must be more to it than simply oh, I've got a medal here, or I'm in the record books there, because someone else will come and take that record. So in the process of pursuing excellence, I think there must be something more to it than simply, oh well, notching up a mark here, a mark there. It's about trying to make sure that it's actually gonna move us forward collectively in a wider way.
If people want to buy your book and also find out about your work, where can I go to?
So the Long Wing can be found in bookshops or online. And I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, Cath Bishop. I have a website, cathbishop.com, and a website, thelongwin.com, that has more materials around the Longwin. And so I'm pretty easy to find and have a conversation with.
I'll leave those in the description below in this video. Cath Bishop, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you for coming on to the 286 project.
Thanks so much. Enjoyed the conversation.